In today's episode, I have a very special treat. I have one of my very best friends from college, Phil Sanchez, who is in the Nerd Zone. But first, Andrew, can you warm it up for us?
Hooked up with Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up. Yo, there's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, is and Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang.
Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Haha, Phil, my man, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, buddy. Doing all right.
I'm guessing you've heard about the famous Trump tapes now. Well, what's your reaction? Were you surprised or just another day in Trump land?
I think it's everybody's sort of go-to response to say that nothing is shocking anymore. Mm-hmm. But if we use the words to describe this, how many times in your life can you get to see a sitting president actively attempt a coup d'etat on audio recording?
You know, I was on Twitter debating with some Trump supporter, and I said, can you imagine if President Obama in 2016 had called the governors or secretaries of state of like Wisconsin and Michigan to try and flip it for Hillary? 2 weeks before the inauguration, I think people would have been pissed at him. I don't think they would have liked that. I think they would have said Obama's trying to subvert democracy or something.
I mean, as always, the biggest, no doubt. I mean, there's no comparison. You can't really. You could say that about 90% of Trump's acts in office. You know, had they been on the shoe been on the other foot, it would have been moral outrage and indignation.
You know, the funniest thing was the justification. So I said, come on, like clearly the Trump supporters would have gone crazy. And the reply was, oh, but it's different because Obama wasn't the candidate and he would have been calling for Hillary. And this is not the same. And it's like, yeah, it's not the exact same situation, but it is a sitting president trying to change the outcome of certified results from a state. And that on its own should be like a no-brainer. Like, you don't do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the worst part isn't even the behavior. This is, Donald Trump is give credit where credit is due. He is the greatest con man in history, certainly in American history, maybe in world history. And he's truly gifted at that. But yeah, we shouldn't be surprised by it. But what is surprising, which is always going to continue to be surprising, is how the Republican Party that we knew growing up, which prided itself on its patriotism and being strong on national security, which was, the go-to political campaigning thing was to say the Democrat was weak on national security. I mean, how is this any different than what we've seen from them for the last 4 years? I mean, remember the meeting, that cringe-worthy meeting with Putin, where he comes out and takes Putin's side over our intelligence community.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time where Russia was not considered an ally of the United States. But people seem to have forgotten that. They really don't seem to mind. It's like, what can Russia do to actually get any Trump supporter to say like, hey, that's probably not okay? I mean, with the latest hackings of the Treasury Department, invading other countries, taking over sovereign nations, it's like, this is in a normal world, this would be considered un-American, and it would draw a partisan clear response, kind of like 9/11, right? Where everybody came together for a brief period, and we've lost that. Do you think we get sort of like some strange dark period, and it's like, yeah, Henry VIII, he was crazy, but then eventually you get Elizabeth, and like things kind of get a little better?
That's a good analogy to use, because that's one of the numerous $1 million questions that come out of all this. Is this my first question during the campaign, even before he won, was during the 2016 campaign, is this the future of political discourse in this country, right? You know, is everybody going to say, wow, this is the playbook? This guy goes on stage with all these established like Republican politicians. He taunts them and berates them, mocks them, makes fun of their wives, does all of these extraordinary, like, it was like a WWE event, right? Without the body slamming, and gets away with it and wins handily in a 15 candidate field or whatever it is. And so the question was always, well, is this going to be the playbook from now on? I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that. Do Americans just get tired of it, and we go through a period where we want somebody boring? And I don't know.
The other thing that was kind of shocking to me, and maybe it shouldn't have been, was I did this as you and I were talking about this morning. I did this like reaction video to the Trump tapes, and it was fun to do because he's just so crazy.
I was just watching it,
and then one of the Trump supporters in the comments said like, "Oh, like what you're saying is all lies. Here's a link to the truth," and the link was to basically the tapes without any commentary. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. But then I was reading, it was on Facebook, and I was reading the comments, and it was clearly must have been posted on a very pro-Trump Facebook page, because it was so fascinating to the extent that everybody watching that video, their seriously 99% consensus was, oh my God, the president has given the Georgia Secretary of State so many opportunities to do the right thing, and he won't do it. In the face of incontrovertible evidence. Now, they didn't say it was incontrovertible, but they were saying, like, in the face of all of this evidence, like, how is it that this rigged Republican Party is like blocking our great president? And I was so amazed, because I was like, wow, I just watched the same video and had a similarly I was revolted by it, right? Yeah. And they had the same reaction, but just completely on the other side. And you wonder, like, wow, we now live in a world where you could literally listen to the same audio tape and have diametrically opposed conclusions. And how does that change, in 15 days or 14 days, whenever the inauguration is?
Yeah. It's baffling. I wish I had an answer for that. It's baffling. I heard a wonderful piece on NPR. This is going back like 2 years. It was an author whose name escapes me, which I should have remembered, but I couldn't. But I was driving, to be fair. And she was talking about a book she wrote about specifically about trying to understand climate denial, and specifically climate deniers. Here you have a situation where scientifically the consensus is very clear, and yet you have folks that, regardless of what they read, regardless of the facts you present to them, always conclude it's not true. And she came up with a term that I guess is new to the study, to the discipline of psychology. And I actually had to figure out a way to write this down, because I was so blown away by it, given its applicability to our current world. But this term that I don't know if she came up with it or she was simply quoting it, the term is implicatory denial. And apparently it's a term that's used to describe when people hear or see something, the implications of which make them unhappy or uncomfortable. They have an ability to say, well, that's just not true. And
yeah, it's like the opposite of confirmation bias, right? Like when you see evidence that confirms what your worldview, you tend to be like, oh, you don't question it.
Right.
And the opposite, I guess, is this implicatory denial, which is you see something, you're like, wait a minute, that smells like it's going to undermine my guy, so I'm going to call bullshit on that evidence.
An entire narrative, which of course we've had to hear for the last 4 years, about the deep state, about the FBI being biased against him because these two people were texting. All of this sort of flimsy dialogue about, you had Bannon behind the scenes with what's his name? I call him Grima Wormtongue. The guy who writes his speeches, who's still there, who's a survivor.
Oh, is he the one that did the immigrant, the Muslim ban?
Right. Steven, isn't it Steven something or I don't know.
Yeah, he's like kind of like a vampire.
Yeah. He's the Grima Wormtongue of the of this current administration. He's but these guys are all anti.
It's Stephen Miller.
Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller. I mean, part of their whole ethos is deconstructing the state, right? Bringing the state down, and you see all of these cabinet heads like DeVos or Rick Perry, people being placed in charge of agencies that whose existence they've long opposed. In order to deconstruct these agencies, these federal agencies. And so it's sort of consistent with that narrative that they've built up, and now it's now blossomed in right-wing media, that, anything they say, meaning anything that doesn't support Trump is the deep state, Yeah. I was listening to your piece. When you were going over the audio, because I listened to about 45 minutes of the hour phone call last night, and it's I mean, you can feel the silence. The people at the other end probably passing notes, going, "This guy's talking ass," and people not wanting to interrupt him, and how obsequious they are. I couldn't, after about 45 minutes, I was like, I think I've heard enough. But my favorite part, which you were going over, was when finally somebody chimes in and says, Mr. President, we can send you the link to it. He's like, I don't want the link. I got a better link. I got a better link.
I know. Yeah. When they're like, we saw your Rudy Giuliani kind of cut up video. We actually have the full unedited video. And it doesn't show, Ruby Tuesday putting it 3 times or the black skirt emerging or whatever. And we'd be happy to share with you that link. And immediately, implicatory denial. No, I don't need that link. I got better links. Oh, my links are beautiful.
Exactly.
I have the best links.
Exactly. I have the best links.
Nobody knows links more than Donald J. Trump.
Yep. We come full circle. We came full circle. In that moment. And
it's like, I don't want your stinking evidence. It's like you wish if the call, like some people on Twitter were saying, hey, Tom, like he's just expressing his views. He has a right to do that. And, set aside the fact that he's calling from the Oval Office or from the White House as a president, talking to a state that receives billions of dollars of federal aid. And if Trump doesn't like your state, he can make it very hard for you. And certainly since he's talking to Republicans, if he doesn't like your career, like Brad. Yeah. And so, Brad is probably thinking like, shit, man, I'm going to be on the MAGA poop list for a long time now. And so, but if you wanted to have a decent call, it could have been, hey, Brad, we don't agree with your results. We have 10 pieces of evidence that we think deserve, your consideration. And I'm going to go through each piece of evidence, not the allegation. I'm not going to tell you, thousands of dead people voted. I'm going to show you the analysis with the names and the obituaries. And I have already sent this to you a week in advance so your team can review it. And after this call, if you're not willing to investigate it, then we're going to bring this to a federal court. And I'm just letting you know that. Now, that would have been a very legitimate call, but that is not how that call went down. That call was like a salesman trying to wear someone down, just throwing like a bunch of random facts together and be like, look, I only need, 12,000 votes, and I've already given you 500,000, kind of bullshit reasons. So just give me my votes, kind of thing. And so it was kind of sad. And the most surprising thing to me was when I was doing this video, I was like, oh, this call must have been leaked on November 10th or November 7th, a couple days after the election. And it was like 2 days ago, basically 2 weeks before inauguration, this dude is conducting these hour-long calls. And I was like, wow, like he is not going to let this go. Not to mention, like, I don't think he spends an hour talking to the White House coronavirus task force. I don't think he's spending an hour talking to the governors about vaccinations, right?
He's completely checked out.
Or he's not spending an hour. He was all big on the $2,000 cash relief. Why isn't he talking about that anymore? Like, let's do another bill.
Was something else. That was something else. I don't like emailing political articles to friends or relatives, but I had to send that to a few people. There was one that was written up in CNN that encapsulated the absurdity of this moment, where suddenly the president, who has taken no interest whatsoever in any of these debates or discussions or negotiations in Congress, suddenly jumps in at the last minute, undermines his party, undermines the what's his name, the owl, Mitch McConnell.
Mnuchin.
Undermines his negotiator, Mnuchin, and sides with the Democrats. To which the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi says, oh, wait, well, we've been asking for $2,000 checks, no problem. She goes to the floor. Done. Complete, done, beautiful. Goes to the floor, pushes for that. Like, I thought this is the ultimate. She probably was laughing the whole way there. And then, I know. And then, of course, the Republicans say, oh, no, we're not going to vote on that. And the whole time, within the context of these two senators that are trying to get reelected in Georgia, who have come out and said that they don't support it. Now, all of a sudden, here we got Donald J. Trump, the self-described man of the people, who's never had a real job in his life, who's never interviewed for a job, right? Who's never done his laundry in a public laundromat. I mean, it never paid a cable bill or an electricity bill. Like, this is the man of the people now. He's going for the $2,000, and in so doing, not only undercuts these two candidates in Georgia that he says he supports, but is undercutting everybody in the Senate, who he's now going to force to either get on the record and vote for or against it, or is going to sort of tarnish them when they side with the non-vote. I mean, to the extent that people pay attention to this anymore. But it brings us full circle back to the implicatory denial and how facts don't really matter when we're not willing to believe what we just saw with our own eyes.
Yeah, I mean, the $2,000 thing not only was so freaking strange. Like, you wait till after the House and Senate approve a bill to then say you don't agree with it.
There's
like,
no
they've been negotiating that process. Shit for 7 months.
No understanding. This has no understanding. Yeah. After 4 years in charge of the country, has no understanding how the whole process works.
I know. It's funny because then I was on Twitter saying, hey, this is such like hypocrisy. And then people were saying, oh, well, Biden didn't want to provide any cash relief and only our great president understands, our pain. And I was like, you were the same people who were saying that Andrew Yang was a socialist because anytime the government gives people any money, it's communism. And now when Trump proposes it, he's a great American defender of the Constitution and, cue the 50 waving flags behind him. It's like, come on, man. It's just, there's no consistency and there's no principle. It's all situational. It's all transactional. And if Trump went for single payer tomorrow, his supporters would probably applaud him for it. Like, I wonder how far he can go before his supporters say, actually, wait a minute, like, that's kind of crazy, or I don't agree with that. Because clearly they're okay. They're okay with running up national debt. They're okay with hiring a bunch of swampy creatures. They're okay with basically tying defense aid and foreign aid to helping find Oppo research. They're okay with calling states. I mean, MAGA people, I thought, were big fans of states' rights. Like, why is the president from D.C. telling a state how to count its own gosh darn votes? So, like, their loyalty to him is amazing.
No. But let's be honest here. If you're talking, when you say MAGA people, if you're talking about everybody who supported Trump, then you're right. You know, that it's a wide array of people who are just sort of blindly following, you know, the party. But let's be honest here. The MAGA brand is a classic, you know, populist brand. It doesn't stand for anything. There's no platform. You know, I was having this conversation with my sister the other day. I was saying, you know, it reminds me, if you study Latin American history and you study Argentina, the history of Perón, the dictator there, he had a movement behind him people called Peronismo. He was the classic populist. When he died, Peronismo didn't go away. It still exists to this day, and nobody can tell you what it means. Nobody. There's no specific policy behind it. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm a worker, you know, soy obrero. I'm a peronista. And then you're like, well, what does that mean? You know, just support government should work for the people or something to that effect. This is my question about Trumpism. You know, when Trump is gone, will other people pick up the mantle? Will his kids, God forbid, get elected to office on this mantle of, you know, that they're supporters of the people? Because the people who were staunch Republicans before Trump came along, I don't see their values being advanced in any way by any of this. You remember, you know me as a lifelong liberal, and you know my feelings about George W. Bush. I don't give George W. Bush a pass, no matter who became president after him. But I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I never, ever once, and despite all of the things that I thought he was a terrible president, I never once questioned his patriotism or love of country. I never, ever, on the worst day of his administration, I never thought that George W. Bush would ever side with a foreign power over his own country. Never once. I can't say that about this guy. To me, Donald Trump is, if you go by the strict definition, he is a Russian asset. I don't believe in the conspiracy that he's being paid by the Russians and he's an agent and this, that, and the other. No, but he is an unwitting Russian asset.
Right. So you're saying he's very useful to Russia, but he's not doing it in a coordinated way.
No, well, are you kidding me? Why? They're too smart to employ someone like him
to try and coordinate.
Like he's a complete he's a head case. Like you can't control somebody like that. But I mean, people, you know, if you look at the definition and you know of what an asset is in espionage terms, he is the definition. He's an unwitting asset of a foreign power. He has advanced the interests of a foreign power over the interests of our own country. When you walk into the White House, I'll give you another example. When you walk into the White House, into the Oval Office, in a meeting with the Russian ambassador, and you spill the beans about some intelligence coup that you pulled off, okay? And you spill it to the Russian ambassador and his assistants, right? And when so doing, this was an actual incident I'm sure recall, in so doing, expose where we got that intelligence, because if you put two and two together in this particular situation, the only way we could have gotten that intelligence was from Israel, then what are you? I mean, you're literally...
Yeah, you're certainly a liability for America.
Of course. You literally were, in order to try impress somebody who you don't need to impress, okay? He's there to kiss your ass, not the other way around. You know, understand the office that you're in, right? And then try to impress this guy, you reveal intelligence. And the kind of intelligence that one could surmise only could have come from one place and compromise people in the process. What does that make you but an asset?
Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah,
we've fallen very, very far, and so there's huge questions to be asked and answered, and I'm not qualified to answer them. You know, even if I could, I'd be a soothsayer. But one of the things that's should be terrifying to all Americans is what happens to the Republican Party. And I identify myself as a lifelong liberal, but I'm an American first, and I don't want to live in a one-party state. I don't think it's good for America if, you know, the Democrats, you don't even have to try to win the presidency. They win it all by default. But is that what's going to happen? Because here's a scenario that could come into play. In 4 years' time, if this guy is still on this world, if he's still alive, right? Because a lot can happen once you're in your mid-70s. I mean, you know, we should all be so lucky to get that far. This guy's not exactly healthy. But if he's still around, he's going to run again, right? He's gotten a taste of this drug that is being president. He'll run again just so he can ride the helicopter, you know? And if he's not in prison, although that's a very real possibility that he's in prison, but if he's not in prison, does everybody fall lockstep behind him? Or do you have a scenario where a Nikki Haley or someone like that says, no, I'm gonna run? And do you have a significant segment of the Republican Party say, this madness, we can't go down this train to crazy town again? You know, we're gonna lose. We know we lost the last time, we're gonna lose again. So let's get behind Haley, and let's say they pull off a coup with a small c, and they get somebody like her on the ticket. You think Trump isn't going to go? Oh, really? I mean, he's trying to burn the house down, the house that is the American Republic, as we speak. What would prevent him from saying, oh, I'm going to go third party on this, which would guarantee whoever the Democrat was, the Democrat would win, right? You know, in other words, does he turn into a really like a Ross Perot type for the next two cycles? I don't know.
I don't think so. I think he will, as long as he wants to. I would imagine he will continue to rule over the Republican Party because his supporters are fired up and dug in. And if Nikki Haley or someone else or Josh Hawley tries to jump the queue and they see that as undermining their great leader who is trying to run again, that would probably be political suicide because they would have done that by now. I mean, how much craziness do you need to see? It's kind of gotten to the point where the time to kind of say enough has come and gone. And I kind of feel like the analogy I would give is it feels a little bit like the Iraq War, where in hindsight, I think a year into it, we all realized like, oh, this is just not working out well at all. And to your credit, and about half the country, a lot of people were opposed to it. Took me a little longer to kind of come to that conclusion. But, you know, there's this notion of sunk costs. Like if you're pro-Trump and you've aligned yourself with Trump, it's very expensive to your political future to kind of unwind that. You might as well just see play the hand out until it's done. And in a way, I kind of feel like Trump is the only one that can turn off Trumpism. He can keep it going as long as he wants. And sadly, if the guy is still calling secretaries of state 2 weeks before the inauguration and spending an hour talking about dead people and dogs and cats voting and all this stuff, and, you know, machines being secretly kind of spirited out in the middle of the night, if he's willing to do that, then clearly he's not letting this go. And the best way for him to redeem himself wouldn't it be to win in 2024? And if he wants
I
right?
think you're absolutely. I think it's absolutely possible that he announces his candidacy right away and spends 4 years just banging away at the Biden administration as the de facto candidate. Of course, Cy Vance and Manhattan's district attorney's office will have something to say about that, because on paper, he's already an unindicted co-conspirator in an election fraud case. And apparently, I'm not a lawyer, but apparently if there's an appetite to charge him in Manhattan, you know, I was talking to a lawyer about this, and we all watch a lot of TV, and the lawyer in question said, you know, these are the easiest cases to try when the cases are not dependent on witnesses and on testimony. In other words, when cases are based on documents. You know, I have a piece of paper here that says I valued this property when I was trying to get a loan at Deutsche Bank. I valued this property at 36 million. When that same year, I submitted this to the tax authorities saying that it's worth 12 million. Well, I mean, you know. And by the way, I'm not a lawyer, but I had to check on this. I said, is that a double dip crime? Like, do you get charged for one? Do you get charged for tax evasion, or do you get charged for bank fraud? And I was assured, no, you've committed both crimes. So you get on that one property, in that one instance, you've committed both bank fraud and tax evasion. And so I'm not convinced. I mean, you know, it would be unprecedented, but I'm not convinced that he will be a free man in 4 years' time. And I don't see how you run for president from a cell.
Right.
So my broader, you know, he is an individual, you know, how old is he? 74, 75 years old? He's not going to live forever. None of us are going to live forever. My point about using the Perón analogy is
74.
Yeah, is that when he does shuffle off this mortal coil, I don't think Trumpism is going to go with him. How
would you define Trumpism?
Well, again, this is my point about Peronismo. I couldn't define that, and I studied it in college. So how could I define this? I would probably say anti-establishment, prone to conspiracy theories, anti-institutional, structurally certainly very racist, anti-immigrant, although they themselves would never embrace that label. It's sort of your classic populist movement that isn't really tied to much in the way of. I mean, the ultimate in symbolism, and I thought it was profound, is when he runs for re-election without a platform. I mean, that was incredible. To most people who don't follow politics, they're like, whatever. It's like, no, this guy went to the Republican National Convention and was nominated without a platform.
Yeah, I mean, there was a famous interview where Hannity threw him a softball saying, hey, what do you want to do in your next term? And he couldn't answer it because he really kind of lives day to day, right? It's news cycle to news cycle from him. There's no kind of central organizing framework for his philosophy. I will say that I would like to take a stab at defining what is so powerful about Trumpism, and then maybe you can let me know.
Please do. Well, wait, you can't define what's powerful about it until you define it. You said you were going to define it.
Yeah, I'll define. I'll take a shot at defining. I'll take a shot.
Give it a shot.
I think it has a few key elements to it. The first is a general belief that a elite kind of corrupt powers have taken advantage of middle America and taken economic advantage and have kind of like rigged the system to line their pockets at the expense of, you know, good, hardworking Americans. And then there's a second element, which is those same people do not respect you. They think you're stupid. They don't respect your heritage. They don't respect your culture. They don't have common sense values. They're, you know, snowflake, all the words you want to use. So there's this like, okay, they rip me off, and then they think I'm not as good as them, right? So there's a very kind of angry sense to it. And I picked this up in my Twitter debates with people. I'm like, what's behind this kind of energy? And then I think the third element is a strong anxiety and discomfort with the pace of change, both culturally in the country, demographic, sort of racial makeup, being told like, hey, you shouldn't call someone an actress anymore. You have to use actor, like these kind, or you shouldn't say Merry Christmas. You have to say Happy Holiday. These are things that are, oh, it's changing everything on me. And I got a black president. I can't say Merry Christmas, and they're going to take my guns, and they don't respect me, and I'm worried about my kids, and like, what the hell happened? And so I feel like I don't know if he figured that out or he got lucky and tapped into it, but he knows it's there, and he totally plays it up. And I think in some ways, this is why I thought Yang was so compelling, because I think Yang was very effective at saying, hey, I actually care. I care about these parts of the country that were left out. And I think there's a way to solve it. And so let's address that. But obviously, Andrew didn't make it out of New Hampshire, but hopefully he will in New York. But that's my sense of the kind of MAGA movement. It's very much like we're getting screwed. We're getting screwed by people who don't respect us, and everything is changing around me, and what's up is down now, and I don't like this kind of new environment.
Yeah, nativist. It is. Yeah. It is fundamentally a nativist movement, and you're absolutely right, and that part of why I say what's going to happen with Trumpism, if Trump runs again, or whether or if he doesn't, is the fact that all of the things that that you and I have talked about many times and concerned about, and what I think one of the main things that drew us to Yang's candidacy is that there are things and changes afoot that are technologically driven that we've been hearing ever since we were children. Since we were old enough to follow politics, you've seen people from both parties go campaign in the Rust Belt, and what do they say? They always say the same goddamn thing. We're going to bring these jobs back. We're going to bring these jobs back, And there was a sliver of time where international trade certainly contributed to the flight of these jobs to areas where there was, cheaper labor. But we all know, people who actually care to actually follow these things, we know now that a great deal of this is that these jobs are disappearing, right, due to automation. And Yang made that. He spoke about it with some authority and with some detail and with some insight. And I mean, if the number one job, I think he pointed out, for a high school educated white man in rural America is truck driver, what's going to happen? You're talking about a demographic that most likely is voting for Trump already. What's going to happen in 5 years when their jobs have literally disappeared? And yes, those jobs will disappear. Long haul trucking as a job, as a human job, will disappear within 5 years. What's going to happen? It could be as soon as the next election, where people are saying, well, things were bad under Trump, but now they're worse since Biden took office, because I don't have a job anymore. And the causality is to blame, as it always is, the incumbent president, because this is the person who didn't do anything to solve it. When in fact, the last time around, this is what Yang was preaching about in his candidacy. We all know it's inevitable. There was I don't know if you saw this, but there was an episode of 60 Minutes. None other than the hallowed show 60 Minutes. They had I was listening to one of their podcast versions, and I think it was the August episode. I'd have to look it up. They had a segment on a company in Arizona that is already, they're a software company with, driverless software, a driverless software product for trucking. And they already have trucks doing long haul routes on the road as of this summer. And and their
Yeah, I mean,
software can see 4 miles down the road.
Yeah. It's I mean, even just if you just buy a off the lot 2019 Tesla, the auto driving feature is just stunning already. And with technology, like, things generally get better every year. And so that gap is certainly getting smaller. And I do agree with you that, like, the whole notion of I'm going to bring those manufacturing jobs back, it's such a more, it's an easier sell, though, because if you have an audience that's looking for a fast solution, it's much easier to tell someone, hey, you know why those jobs are gone? It's because the Chinese screwed us, and I'm going to stick it to them. So then you get the whole, like, anti-Chinese vibe thing. Right. I'm going to stick it to them, and I'm going to get those Mexicans to pay for the wall, and I'm going to bring your jobs back. Like, if he could actually do that, like, I were in a situation, I'd be taking that blue flag and flapping that MAGA thing around too. I think the sad truth is, like, dude, this is free trade, and people like products that are lower cost per unit. And if labor costs are lower in other countries, like, it's going to be pretty hard to compete. If it's not China, it's Vietnam. It's not Vietnam. It's Malaysia. It's Mexico. Like, I mean, you cannot go to Walmart every month and buy all this stuff for close to nothing and then complain about China, because the reason why all that stuff is so cheap is because it's built by people who are, working for almost nothing. And if you want, you can go to and buy American only, and that's like the Swiss route, where I lived for the last 4 years, where everything costs 3 times as much. And in some ways, I don't mind it, because I feel like, well, at least we're supporting the local economy. But that quality of life, everybody having like 2 cars and a 50-inch TV and all the Amazon boxes showing up at your door every week and filling your giant SUV with stuff from Costco and Walmart, like, that's because of China. And I just feel like that's an argument that people don't want to hear, because now you're telling them, like, wait a minute.
Yeah, you're not going to get elected on that argument.
Yeah, I can't get my $2 TV and stick it to the Chinese. Like, no, I want both. And it's like, sorry.
Well, when you think about it, our politics,
my campaign speech.
It's the politics of the personal savior, right? I'm going to bring these jobs back. I'm going to do this. It's the politics of scapegoating.
Yeah.
It's the tried and true. And unfortunately, that's, as I was saying, I bring it up because that's a bell that was been rung for 30 years. As long as we've been aware of politics, old enough to be aware of it, you've heard candidates ringing that bell. And now suddenly they're in a situation where they have to attempt to unring that bell by saying, how refreshing it would be. I mean, Yang, I think, is the first one to speak openly about it. And he could do that because I think he felt that, what are my chances of actually winning? I'm, unknown. I mean, I'm sure he knew it was a long shot, but you go out there, and the mainstream guys are not willing to talk about it, or the mainstream, meaning the guys that are expected to win, they're not willing to talk about it because ultimately it's describing a problem that is not easily solved. It's an issue that is economic, therefore it's not very sexy. It doesn't necessarily pull at people's heartstrings. These are all things that make it difficult to run on. And yet, if we're gonna continue to have our leaders, go to these places and say, vote for me because I'll bring these jobs back, it's going to hinder everything. And I think Biden has an opportunity. I'm a big renewables guy. I mean, to me, the Green New Deal is the second or top 3 most important issues. And I don't care what you call it, but I mean, fundamentally, we have to alter the way we do things in this country if we want to have a chance. But the way that you do it isn't to sell it for the environmental side. You sell the infrastructure and jobs component of it.
Yeah, the thing I struggle with, I mean, I care deeply about climate as well, because to me, it seems like one of those one-way doors where, like, the longer you wait, the more expensive it will be to address it. And if you're wrong and you're too late, then the error costs are quite considerable. The thing that I struggle with, and it's similar to the trade thing, is I think it requires sacrifice. Like, I don't necessarily buy the argument that, oh, with the Green New Deal, you're going to get more jobs and you're going to be able to have the same lifestyle and save the environment. Like, I would like to consider an alternate interpretation, which is, hey, we have been consuming a lot of energy per person. We also buy a lot of products that end up in landfills, and we eat beef, like, frankly, like, sometimes multiple times a day. Like, these are all things that have a lot of implications, and we may need to kind of tighten our belts and not buy as much stuff, not eat as much kind of unhealthy food, and not consume as much energy. And that means, like, well, that Escalade that gets 12 miles a gallon, like, maybe that's not such a good thing for the environment. And I don't know if America is ready to say no to things for ourselves. Like, we're not good at that.
Yeah, really?
It's always like, when I moved back this summer and we were watching American TV again, it was like every ad was like, bigger, stronger, more cheese, more horsepower. It was just like more. And I just worry. I mean, the other thing that concerns me is obesity, diabetes. These are expensive problems, and there are many of which are kind of brought on by society and sort of choices we make, right?
Brother, we would need a whole separate other show if we're going to go into that, under that topic. I mean, the ripple effect of personal choice on environment, healthcare costs. I mean, forget it. Like, I'm 100% into that. But I mean, you're absolutely right. If you think Americans, like this is a country that to save your fellow man isn't willing to put on a surgical mask.
Right. You can't put on a mask. If people can't put on a mask during a pandemic, how are we going to convince people to eat healthier foods, exercise more, buy less stuff, consume less energy? Like, how are we going to do that?
By the way, are we allowed to cuss on this program?
Yeah. If it's like intermittent and it's not like extreme.
Okay,
but you can use the F word.
Okay,
from time to time. So
the best thing that I heard about the pandemic, the absolute best thing was something that I don't know where it came through my Facebook, or I don't know, somebody posted something. It was probably like a Twitter post, but this is the most insightful thing I heard about the pandemic, and it was something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing: if COVID-19 made your dick fall off, this whole pandemic would have been over 6 dicks in. You can see if any listeners will write in to contest that reality. That's the reality. Because the thing is, this attitude that, you know what, a couple of old people that are going to die anyway have died. And, I knew, so-and-so at the office who got sick and died, but, he was overweight. So, I don't know, implicitly he had it coming or something. I don't know. But that's the attitude, man. That's the attitude. And it's, nobody likes being locked up. Nobody likes being, having to isolate. We're all dealing with it, and we all struggle with it. But honestly, my reaction has been, unless you're one of the people that has lost their job because you're in the service industry, and you had to spend through your savings. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people that are struggling. Unless you're one of those people, are you going to sit here and tell me that wearing a mask, is, just an infringement on your? This is a sad commentary on where our country is right now.
Yeah, it has for sure become a political kind of symbol. If you're wearing a mask, you're basically criticizing our leader, and we can't have that. And
Bizarre.
that's where we are, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's bizarre.
Have you seen
Of all
there
the
was a
irresponsible,
video.
inexcusable, unforgivable things that he has done in office, I think that that's got to be in the top 10 to have proactively convinced his supporters, or appear to be 35% of the country, that to wear a mask is an act of political defiance against him. That to me is when people say this guy has blood on his hands, I don't know how you argue against that point when you consider that he has been the main mover behind this notion that we shouldn't wear masks. And through the years, as technology has accelerated things, I look back. I think you and I might have talked about this at some point. I look back at my liberal arts education, and I say to myself, "Wow, are people going to interview me as an old man, and say, what was it like to go to school and study such meaningless horseshit like history and, literature and things of that nature?" Are we just like the ultimate, like we were the last generation to receive such an education? Because it's, how could it not be considered pointless in this technological age? And then if the Trump administration has done something, it has reinvigorated the importance of the liberal arts education. Because honestly, when you look at the lack of basic civics, a lack of a poor understanding of basic civics among Americans, if it wasn't there, we wouldn't be. I'd like to believe we wouldn't be in such a rut with this guy. Because take the mask thing. This notion of unfettered freedom, that I will do what I want when I want, is an illusion. There's no such thing. Even somebody who hasn't been to law school knows that freedom of speech is limited in some ways. You can't run into a crowded movie theater and scream fire and then claim free speech. When you're doing something that is deleterious to the people around you, then there are restrictions in any free society. And worse than that, you wouldn't want to live in a country where there was unfettered freedom, where you literally could do anything that you wanted, But I don't know.
Let me show you a video. I don't know if this guy is the product of a liberal arts education. Maybe he may have gone to Bates or something. But this is a man who's going to.
Hello?
You don't go in. Correct? To hold my civil right. Guess what? There's a pandemic coming. There's no pandemic. Officers came out here to help you. What's a mask? Oh, wait, what's a mask? Other people right now. They offered for you to give you help inside. 2 doctors. With the mask. There's a lot of sick people in there. 2 doctors came outside offering help. We're both going to help you. Come on in, put a mask on. With the mask. You refuse. That's on you, not on us or on them. We don't have
Hold on.
I can kind of see part of it. I could hear part of it, but
Oh man.
Well, I couldn't really see. I just saw like.
All right, hold on. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. There was like a cop wearing a mask and a dude that was yelling about where's the mask.
Dude, my Wi-Fi is this is terrible. It's terrible. I live in a part of the country where technology is supposed to be kind of good.
And you know, there you go. Green New Deal, baby. We need broadband.
Some infra. All right, here we go. Here's the Bates guy, Bates College. Now, I should be fair. I'm kidding. He's not a Bates College grad.
Okay.
Maybe Colby, but let's see. Hold on. Now I didn't do it with audio. Hold on. Sorry. Share audio. There we go. All right. So this is a guy who's trying to go to the ER because he's having chest pains.
I got AFib, atrial fibrillation. I absolutely could die within a few hours having a blood clot. And these officers and these people will not let me go in. And though they're not upholding my road without a mask, they won't let me go in without a mask. They will not uphold my rights. They will not uphold my rights.
When you're taping, clarify on that it's not that we're not letting you. You don't want to go in there with a mask. That's on you, not on us.
Exactly.
Correct?
It's not. But your job is to uphold my rights.
No.
My civil rights.
Guess what? There's a pandemic happening, whether you believe it or not. That's on you.
There's no
2
pandemic.
doctors came out here, offered to help you. 2 of them.
With a mask.
Took away 2 doctors
With a
who are helping
mask.
other people right now. They offered for you to give you help inside. 2 doctors.
With a mask.
There's a lot of sick people in there. 2 doctors came outside, offer you help. They said, we're both going to help you. Come on in, put a mask on.
With a mask.
You refused. That's on you, not on us or on them. You're not entering.
I don't have a right to not wear a mask. That's what you're saying. I have to wear a mask or I die.
Michael, you have to.
I have to or I die. He knows I'm getting kicked out of the hospital.
All right.
I got it.
So as you can see, that gentleman is seeking medical care for a medical emergency at a hospital.
Is he really?
Well, or he's saying
didn't sound like he was dying of a heart attack.
well, he's saying he's saying he's having issues. He wants to go in, and it's really he's incredulous that he has to wear a mask, and he's saying that it's his rights. And this is the world we live in, right?
Yeah.
Like the dude is trying to go in. Like when you look at a hospital, they're wearing masks even when it's not a pandemic. Like this is very normal. And he's convinced that it's a conspiracy. He's like, oh, there's no pandemic. So
I bet you when he goes to the supermarket, he grudgingly puts the mask on. When they tell him you can't come in here and buy food, he probably puts it on. But now he has cops in front of a hospital. He's got an audience. He breaks out the phone. You know, this is, you know.
Maybe again with your analogy, if it were something that would affect him personally for his personal life.
Yeah, if his Johnson was teetering on the edge, believe me, he'd put the goddamn mask on. You know. Yeah. He'd be donating to healthcare workers, the guy. He'd be getting all his salary. Fucking charlatan.
I mean, you know that joke that you gave. Do you think there's something about it being men? Do you think? But I think there are plenty of women in MAGA.
No, look. There's a lot. That's a whole other program. We could have a whole other program about how gender relations are changing. But this is, you know, there are idiots on both sides of the gender divide. This is unbelievable. It's brought out just the worst. I mean, not to make too much of a downer because we were going through bad times, but you know, as you know, my girlfriend is a medical doctor, and she's worked on the COVID ward up here in Montreal for a number of weeks. It's not an easy thing, you know, to do, nor even, I mean, it stresses me out just hearing about it. So I can't imagine being in it. But, you know, now that they've rolled out this vaccine, you know, you have this whole other thing about watching the manner in which the vaccine is rolled out and the complete chaos, even on this side of the border where I think the government has handled things compared to the dumpster fire that is our country. They've handled things a little bit better. But this vaccine rollout, you'd see, is brought out the worst in people. You know, you have people who don't work with patients or frontline patients mysteriously moving to the front of the line, and there was an article in I forget the publication, but there was a protest by a number of residents at Stanford Hospital, right in your neck of the woods, where these residents were basically saying, where's the vaccine for us? There are, senior staff members that work from home and don't actually interact with patients. And we all know some that have been given the vaccine. While we're still waiting, we don't even have a date yet. And there are apparently 3,300 residents, medical residents at Stanford Hospital alone. And a number of them actually felt compelled to go out and protest. Like, why aren't we first in line? A resident is the junior physician that's not yet a full-fledged doctor that's out there. And I thought to myself, if you're running a hospital, if you're one of these doctors that takes yourself out of patient care or research and becomes an administrator, right? And, runs a hospital, this is your chance to shine. This is your chance to show leadership. It should be very, very clear that orderlies, nurses, and residents, the people who are interacting with patients, that those are the people that, you inoculate first, and then you move your way up. And yet here we see this all across the board, people just boxing each other out, for the vaccine.
It has been so disappointing. As you know, my mom is in her 80s, and she has had open heart surgery, and she has difficulty breathing. She lives in Florida. This is a picture from just a few days ago in Florida, where the governor said that they were going to distribute the vaccine on a first come, first served basis. And there were people lining up in the middle of the night on lawn chairs, not 6 feet apart, by the way. And
insanity.
It's like, did you think that this was going to be an issue? Did you think that you're going to need a plan on how to distribute this vaccine in a timely way? Because the whole warp speed thing, getting the FDA approval was a huge milestone, but that's like getting notification that the shipping label has been printed when you order something. You want to track it all the way through, right?
Right.
And this is just and I don't understand why the president is spending an hour on calls with the Secretary of State of Georgia. He should be talking to the governor of Georgia about the vaccine distribution plans and what can I do to help as the president? Because right now we only have about 1% of the whole country inoculated. And that was approved by the FDA 23 days ago. And the story during the campaign was oh, it's all stockpiled. It's ready to go. I have a general that's going to get these vaccines the day it's approved. And here we are, 24, 25 days later, and we're only at 1% inoculation. If you run the numbers at the current rate of inoculation, we won't even get to 60% until February of 2022.
No, there has to be an exponential increase in the amount of people being inoculated, no doubt.
What? Well, who's in charge?
Nobody's in charge. It's a shit show. But if you look at the, I don't know if you followed this. I don't think you had moved back yet. But I live in Vermont, as you know, and during the early days of the pandemic, a lot of people in this area would tune into the press conferences that Andrew Cuomo was doing in New York. Right?
Oh yeah. I watched those from Switzerland.
I mean, I don't think most people could have told you who the governor of New York was. They can tell you now.
Yeah.
And it was such a juxtaposition between the president and this governor of New York. And say what you want about Cuomo, like any politicians, he has his pluses and minuses. But this became a thing where people wanted to tune in. I know I wanted to tune in. I wanted to hear, his style of just reporting the facts. And even sometimes that weren't positive, that we're not doing well with this, but we're doing this to address it, and so on and so forth. Why isn't there someone at the federal level? This is look, you love publicity, you love being on TV. We know he loves that. Why can't he go on TV and read and do a press conference like this every day, where he's talking about progress, where he's reporting, what the vaccine penetration is in different areas and different states and across, so that people have a sense of progress, that they can experience in a way with warts and everything, how it's going.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when that White House coronavirus task force was doing periodic press conferences, and they would have Fauci and Birx and even the president would show up from time to time. But it seems like they've decided that after the FDA gave approval to Pfizer and Moderna, like their job is done, and they've said, look, it's now up to each of the 50 states to kind of figure it out. And my sense is like, well, if you're in a national pandemic, the buck kind of stops with you, and maybe the states are the ones to implement it. But then I would be talking to each governor saying, show me your plan for how you're going to get this done, because I'm going to be sending millions of doses to you, and I want to know how are you going to order, who's going to get access first, how are they going to get notified, where are they going to go, who's going to administer it, blah blah blah. And then I was listening to the news where they were talking about the White House was saying, like, Kayleigh McEnany was like, well, there was a snowstorm and it was over the holidays. You didn't know that it was going to be Christmas? You didn't know that the New Year's, it's not like a surprise holiday. It happens every year. There's Christmas and New Year's. Plan. It's like, can you imagine if you were at work?
It's ridiculous.
And you missed your numbers, and they're like, "What?" And you're like, "Well, boss, let me tell you,
it was a snowstorm.
It was a snowing, and then Christmas, and the New Year's."
Yeah,
I would be like, okay, and that's why we had the forecast as we did for fourth quarter. We assumed that, so you didn't make your number. Like, you're accountable.
Hey, listen, there's an easy way to motivate folks. Pay them overtime. But tell them, you need to work over the holiday. We're going to have folks coming in. We're not going to slow down this plan. We're going to have folks coming in getting vaccinated. Absolutely. Look, developing a vaccine in 1 year, in less than 1 year, 9 months, was a medical first, right? We always knew that administering said vaccine to 330 million people was also going to be operationally a first. Something that, this is in its own way, from an operational perspective, it's as big an achievement, a big an undertaking. And when your leader is talking about bringing light inside the body, to bring it in the body, to do a cleaning, or to inject the cleanser because it kills it immediately, we could look at that. I mean, you're literally, he should be wearing a clown nose, I mean, it's like, this is what you get. And then, of course, the irony of, railing as he did against Obama for playing golf, that he should now do nothing but play golf ever since the election. He's, this person who can't get enough of being on TV has been on TV like twice.
Yeah.
At a time where people need to see the leader, that people need to see what's being done, or just, why don't you just walk? Why don't you just, do a Nixon kind of salute and let Pence be president for 2 weeks. And if you don't like the job that much.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, when you want to see him and you want to hear from him, because you feel like, hey, 3,000 people dying a day is kind of a big deal, like we should do something about this, he's nowhere to be seen. And then when you don't want to hear from him, like, hey, the election's over, you lost, like, just go away, he is nonstop blabbing around. And if you look at his Twitter feed, it's like, wow, there must not be a pandemic going on, because he's not talked about it at all, other than complaining the other day about how he was very angry that Fauci is so revered by the people, but people forget that Fauci works in the Trump administration, and how come he's not getting more credit? Like, he literally says that kind of stuff, and it's crazy. I mean, I'm like, how of all the things that you could talk about, you're complaining that the Wall Street Journal talked about Fauci in a positive light? Like, that's your biggest issue right now?
Did you ever think you'd see the day where a conservative politician would attack the Wall Street Journal?
I know. And he's even turning on Fox News now. Now he's only posting links to like OAN.
I mean, when the Journal comes out against you, you need to sort of correct. You need to say, wait a minute. What am I saying that, I don't know. It's.
I mean, let me just so people don't think I'm making this up. This is the president of the United States on January 3rd. Something how Dr. Fauci is revered by the lamestream media as such a great professional, having done, they say, such an incredible job, yet he works for me and the Trump administration, and I am in no way given any credit for my work. Like, this is our president. This is what he chooses to talk about. Like, who is this guy?
It also shows you that from Trump's point of view, which shouldn't be a surprise because, look at the lineup. I don't watch Fox every day. I watch it on occasion to try to get a sense of the madness out there. But if you look at the lineup, they have Fox and Friends in the morning. Mm-hmm. They have like Judge Janine or something in the early evening. Yeah. And then they have their two heavy hitters, which is what's his name? Hannity and Tucker Carlson. Mm-hmm. Those are all political punditry shows. Yeah. There's nothing resembling news in any of it. They are all, in fact, what did Tucker Carlson? He was being sued, but wasn't he? I forget the situation, but he was being sued, and his lawyers actually said in a court, and this was in the transcript, that no one who watches Tucker Carlson actually thinks he's telling the truth. Something to that.
Right. Oh, they're probably trying to justify it, saying like, "Oh, it's like an entertainment show. It's not news."
Right. But it was hilarious because it was in the court record that was the defense his lawyers were using against this, in this civil case. I assume it was a civil case, but that shows you that's Trump's regard for news is that it is punditry. You know, that when you say something nice about Fauci, you should be throwing some respect to him for having not hired Fauci, because Fauci, of course, is a civil servant that's been there for.
Can you imagine at work if someone like executive leader at a corporation said like, "Hey, this middle manager is getting all this credit. Like, don't they realize that that they work for me, and how come I'm not getting this credit?" Like, you would never see a real leader talk like this.
Well, a leader would go out and take credit for your work because you're his underling. He would never go out and pout about it not happening for him.
Yeah, and a real leader would be like, "Yeah, this middle manager is amazing. He's doing a great job."
That would be a great leader. Yeah. Which doesn't exist in most of corporate America. But yes, that would be the ultimate in leadership, that you would stand up and say, "Hey, listen, we did great things. We did great things, but I have a great team behind me. Let me highlight this person." Yeah. No, you're not going to get that from me.
All right.
Speaking about good leadership, before you tie it up, let's talk about future New York City mayor.
Yeah.
I mean, is he going to go the distance? What do you think?
Well, I mean, you have family in the New York area, and I mean, we both grew up in the tri-state area, so I I certainly would use a bridge and tunnel to go to New York on a fairly regular when I was growing up. I think he has a good shot. The polls certainly have Yang in the lead, but he's tied with this other guy, Adams, who's a pretty compelling bio. He's an African-American guy who worked in the police, NYPD, but it was a big advocate for like criminal justice reform. And I think he's been in local elected office for a while. The thing that, of course, Yang has going for him is that the city, it sounds like, is ready for like to try something new, because de Blasio kind of came from inside the system, and he's not exactly been the most loved mayor, right? So so I think Yang has a great chance. I'm almost more concerned about like, okay, well, when you get there, if you win, like, it's not going to be a walk in the park to get anything done. I mean, it's a big ass city with like $1 trillion GDP on its own. So we'll see. I mean, and then he's gonna have to have some kind of figure out some relationship with the governor. And you know, New York's not like the easiest city to lead, I would imagine. But I mean, I'm optimistic. I mean, I love Yang, and I would have preferred that he had been made Commerce Secretary or you know, even SBA or something like that. But you know, my understanding is that there were offers made. I don't know for what roles, and I think he probably decided if he can pull it off in New York, he could have a real big impact, and of course, sets him up for even bigger things down the road. What do you think?
Well, you know, to tell you the truth, I've barely followed it, so I don't know what the you know, what his chances are with respect to the rest of the field. But you know, he has name recognition now, where you know, which I would imagine that most of the other candidates don't. And of course, whoever wins the Democratic primary is going to be the mayor, I think. I think it'd be really interesting. I mean, I think, you know, first of all, you know, above and beyond, you know, it being a nice demographic change, him being Asian American, he's young. You know, he's young, and he's not just physically young. He thinks young. He thinks about technology. He thinks about new things, and he's also. During the election, I wish he would have been more partisan. He was very careful not to go down the same path that everyone else was pointing out what a bad leader Trump was, and I think he said, "Well, let me just talk about. That's obvious. Let's just talk about these. Let's talk about the more substantive issues." And I think him being an issues guy makes him very appealing, and it might be very appealing in New York, given all that's gone on. I think that given the issues in New York, particularly with respect to racial injustice and the NYPD, that he's going to have to be able to speak on those issues.
Yeah, you know? And that's not something that he's shown he's comfortable doing. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see how he does. But I feel like he has a way better chance of becoming mayor than winning the Iowa caucus or the New Hampshire primaries. Or, you know, so I mean, he's a stronger name today. He has a national backing. He's been on CNN forever now. And so, and the city, I think, has a thirst for new approaches, and they're kind of like, they're ready for a fresh voice. So we'll watch with bated breath. But in the meantime, I do want to tell you, Phil, it's been a pleasure having you in the Nerd Zone.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
All right. Well, we'll have to get you back on the show. I'm sure people will love to hear more from you as events unfold. In the meantime, stay healthy. And with that, we'll say goodbye, nerds.
Likewise. Goodbye, nerds.